This is the second video for electrons, and in this video we're going to be talking about ions. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to identify and explain if an atom will become a cation or anion using the octet rule and periodic table. So in our previous video, we talked about valence electrons, and I said you will never have more than 8 valence electrons, and that is due to the octet rule. So an atom wants 8 valence electrons to complete their outer shell. If it doesn't have 8, it's going to gain or lose electrons to get there. So the only elements that currently meet the octet rule are the ones under the 8 column. And we know that helium actually has 2 valence electrons even though it's under 8. And that brings me to my first exception, which is that hydrogen and helium meet the octet rule with 2 valence electrons. So hydrogen and helium don't need 8 to meet the octet rule, they only need 2. And that's because the first energy level on your atom, for example, this one on carbon right here, can only hold 2 valence electrons. And since hydrogen and helium only have 1 energy level, they are complete with 2 instead of 8. Everything else needs 8 though. So I said for the octet rule, if they don't have 8, they're either going to lose or gain electrons to get there. And how do we know which one's it's going to do? Well, if you label your periodic table, you can use that to help you figure it out. Atoms that have 1, 2, or 3 valence electrons will actually lose. And that's because even though their outside ones don't meet the octet rule, their inside energy level, the rings, have enough electrons to meet the octet rule. And so 1, 2, and 3, they're going to lose. If it has 5, 6, or 7 valence electrons, it's going to gain valence electrons. And that's because it's so close to having 8, it doesn't want to give any up. We already know that if it has 8 valence electrons, it's already met the octet rule. And so it doesn't need to gain or lose. And then if it has 4 valence electrons, it's not going to gain or lose. It's just going to share valence electrons. So how do I know if it's cation or anion? Well, when it loses electrons, which means it has 1, 2, or 3 valence electrons, it's going to be a cation and become a positive charge. The reason it becomes positive when it loses is because the electrons are negatively charged. So if you get rid of negative, the atom becomes more positive. The way I remember it is if you kick the negative person out of your friend group has a more positive vibe to it. If it has 5, 6, or 7 valence electrons, it's going to gain electrons and become an anion. If you are gaining negative charges, you are going to become more negative. If you bring a negative person into your friend group, you're just going to get bad vibes. Okay. So we know that nitrogen has 5 valence electrons, which means that it's going to have to gain electrons to meet the octet rule. So we know it's going to have a negative charge. So the negative means the charge, and it's an anion. If it has 5, it needs 3 more to get to 8. So it's going to have a negative 3 charge. So this is the electrons it's going to, in this case, gain. But if it were losing, it would just be the number of electrons that you would lose. So when you are writing the charge, it's the positive or negative sign and then how many electrons it's gaining or losing. And the way to remember that a cation is positive and an anion is negative is that, let me see if I can move this. Cats are good. They also have pause, which makes cations positive. The more simpler way to remember that is that the word cation has a plus sign in it, which is the T. And then anion looks like onion, and onions are bad. They make you cry. So they're going to have a negative charge. So on the periodic table, if we know the left side loses, we can label that side as cation. And so everything on the left side that loses electrons will become positive, a cation. Anything on the right side that has 5, 6, or 7 valence electrons is going to be negative and anion. So we can go ahead and label that part as well. And then because 8 is not going to do anything, it's just stays at 8 because it met the octet rule already, it's going to be neutral. So this is the first example problem. I want you to complete the table below for the 8 elements, figure out if they're positive or negative, are they going to be a cation or anion, and then what will the charge be? So remember, your charge is positive or negative, and then the number represents the number of valence electrons either lost or gained. So pause and complete that, and then unpause when you're ready to review it. So these are the answers to example problem number 1. Now the ones I really want to go over are argon and helium. Because they are under the 8, they are neither positive or negative, they are both neutral. And then hydrogen can both lose an electron and gain an electron depending on the situation it's in. So it could become a positive 1 or negative 1, but the rest of these were should have been pretty easy to follow using the labeled periodic table. Okay. The last question we have is, we have an unknown element dot diagram to the right. I want you to determine if it's going to be a cation or anion and explain why you say that below. So pause, take 1 to 2 minutes to write your answer, and then hit play when you're ready to review it. Okay, I'm going to review it. Make sure that you actually answered it yourself. Don't wait for me to do it. It's not going to help you learn. Okay. Whoa, what happened? Okay, so it has 3 valence electrons, which means that it'll become a cation because it has to lose the valence electrons to meet the octet rule. So, just a summary, octet rule says an atom wants to have 8 valence electrons, and if it doesn't, it's going to gain or lose to get to 8. If it loses, it's going to become positive because it's getting rid of the negative electrons, and we call that a cation. If it's gaining electrons, it's gaining negative charges, so it becomes overall negative and an anion. The charge number represents if it's a cation or anion, so you would have a positive sign if it's cation, negative sign if it's an anion, and then the number represents the number of electrons lost or gained. And the number will never be higher than 3. So you go from positive 3, positive 2, positive 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. Okay. Make sure all your notes are complete, and then you are good to go on to the next activity.